Newrealities. This is Alan Steinfeld, and if you've been watching this program, you know we are in a shift of consciousness. There's an evolutionary process that seems to be taking place, and so many people are coming forward to deliver a message, a vibration of this change, and that's why I'm so happy to be talking today to Tom Kenyon. And Tom, like I'm sure many people know, is bringing through a lot of high energy beings and sound, and he'll be doing something in New York coming up September 5th called In the Company of Angels. So Tom, welcome to New York. Welcome to the show. Do you want to talk first about this event that's happening in September and tell me what the inspiration was behind this?
Sure. The inspiration was a series of experiences I've had with angels. And as I went into this exploration, more looking at my history with these enigmatic beings, I was communicating with the Hathors, an interdimensional group of beings, and they said, as well did the Arcturians, that angels are essentially electromagnetic fields of intelligence. And they are created for a purpose by a being, could be a god, demigod, could be an alien intelligence, could be even a human being. And so the Hathors went into various descriptions of these electromagnetic fields of intelligence, including, I thought very interestingly, what they call subatomic angels that move through the space of our body for healing and transformation. And so I agreed to do this event in New York, but when I set the class, I did not intend to do a world meditation, but the Hathors came in and asked me the last half hour of this event, September 5th, if people could join in from 5:30 to 6 with a world meditation to bring the angelic realm into a nexus point with all the human beings who are there in New York, but especially also everyone in the world who's participating, to raise the elevation of humanity's awareness about the environment, because we are in a very dire passage and species are disappearing very rapidly. So this is their work to bring things up to a higher level of awareness. And it's done energetically, and it's a very interesting process in that I've done these world meditations before, and people in other areas, like thousands of miles away in Europe, in Africa, Russia, say they had very powerful experiences, even though they weren't actually physically there. So there is this non-localized phenomena that takes place with these world meditations. And so as we get into this discussion more, Alan, I think it would be good for me to mention what I call the imaginary box. And it's for those viewers who, some of this material is so far out. The imaginary box is a mental device that allows you to take in what makes sense to you, and if it doesn't make sense, you just toss it in the box and you look at it later. Because I think it's very, very important when we start in looking at the area of altered states of consciousness and what people call spirituality, to have our wits about us, to use our sense of logic and our values, and we are the filter for the information, so I don't think we should ever give our power away to anyone else. So as your listeners, viewers are taking this in, if something I say doesn't make sense, just toss it in the box and keep what is of value for you. And I think that would make a very beneficial environment for us to explore this.
Right, and I agree. There's a lot of stuff I hear, and it's like, where is this person coming from? And also, it's an acquired familiarity. Some people might not even go along with the whole idea of channeling. I sort of grew up on it in a sense. I mean, that was one of my first avenues of awakening to this higher consciousness. So it's not that I accept it, because there's a lot of people that are not channeling anything except their alter ego, or and you can tell, right? You can tell like who's really out of the way and who's there. For people who are open, let's go deeper into the whole landscape that, from the perspective that you're seeing it. I love how you end the movie. You say that you've made peace with this spiritual inner war, the acceptance of.
Yes. Right.
And I think that's something we all have to come to in our own inner journey. And you especially, because you're an open vessel in a sense of this. So what do you see now from the perspective you're in? What's the overview of all these beings, I guess I'm asking, where the Hathors fit in, the angelic realm? I mean, how much of that do you see, and what does it look like from your perspective?
Well, referencing that statement in the movie, I think it might be good to mention the incident that happened when I was at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And a friend came by my place, and I lived in a very large house, and I had a big room that was the dining room or the ballroom. And in one corner was my mattress where I lived as a student, and on the other side was this altar and pictures of the saints and gurus of all the different traditions, because I was exploring all the major religious and spiritual traditions, meditating every day. And there was this battle between the human in one corner and this yogi wannabe in the other corner. And so my roommate, not my roommate, but this friend comes in, he'd never been there before, and he looks around and says, "Who's your roommate?" And like this little dim light bulb went off. There was this conflict, and the conflict was between my humanity and my spirituality. And I think my life from that standpoint has been, how do you bring the two together? And it has been like a Moebius strip, and it's an infinite progression, as every answer that comes to me brings more questions. So I thought I had an understanding of the territory, the landscape, as you describe it, but it's more complex. Every time I get a bigger picture, it gets bigger. Mm-hmm. And I remember one time at my wife and I live on an island, and we were waiting on a ferry, and I was very upset with the Hathors because they had just given me a bigger picture of things, and I was comfortable with what they had already shown, and they laughed and laughed and said, "Oh, you don't like the bigger picture." So I think part of our human dilemma is, how do we accommodate a wider vision, and how do we take what is of value from that vision and bring it into our life and make it work for us? That's what's important. I'm very pragmatic. So even though these sources of information are very, I call it woo-woo land, they come from altered states of consciousness, deep meditation, whatever word you might wish to describe, I'm very pragmatic. Will it help? So to answer your question, the first reference point I would make is the Hathors appeared to me unannounced, uninvited. I was doing a CDOS meditation retreat on my own, and these two Hathors appeared, and they started to instruct me. And they started to give me information about the brain, about sound, and geometry that was very intriguing, because I've been involved in brain research for 10 years. And I couldn't buy who they said they were or where they came from. Another parallel universe. They say that universes are stacked like eggs in a carton, something for the big imaginary box. The brilliant engineer Itzhak Bentov actually mentioned this in a book of his called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Right. So the Hathors say that all universes are stacked, or anyway, the ones near us are stacked like eggs, and they came over from another universe, invited to enter this universe by an Arcturian by the name of Sanat Kumara, who many people know as an ascended master, for the purpose of introducing a balanced energy. So we have a universe that is intense duality, and we have these beings, Hathors, that are coming in from another dimension. It is a completely different world and approach to things. Mm-hmm. And their fundamental reference point that they keep coming back to again and again and again ad nauseum is that appreciation or gratitude, that vibrational state, is a very useful vibrational field for moving through life and taking action and responding. And there are other things that are required. You can't just be in appreciation and gratitude. Other actions have to be taken. But they say that that state, as a reference point, can help tremendously in this process of individuation as we move forward into this next phase of our planetary evolution. And they say that we are in the midst of an immense chaotic node. And chaotic nodes are, in their definition, when you have different levels of creation. Let's take the world, for instance. We have the ISIL horrors taking place. We have polar bears are disappearing. The sea is acidifying. We're having violence everywhere. These are all different levels of chaos. And they say that when enough chaos intersects, you have a new level of chaos, and they call that a chaotic node. And we are in this, what they call a chaotic node.
Does that chaotic node bring us to a new place of complexity? And in chaos theory, they say that systems break down, so new levels can form that interconnect the chaos.
That's exactly what they say. That's exactly what they say.
Okay.
And so the chaos, and the other thing that's interesting from their perspective is that when these chaotic nodes occur, you get these timelines. They say that the life we live is one possible timeline, and we get stuck in it, but there are many timelines that are possible. And when a chaotic node emerges, timelines get closer, and you can hop into a higher, more creative timeline or a lower one. It all depends on what we do in the moment with the choices that we make. But it's a possibility, and so that's the good news.
Thank you for that explanation, because it goes along with some aspects of quantum physics and parallel multiverses. But when you say they showed up to you, appeared to you, how did they appear? And how do they talk to you? Because how do you know, and I'm just questioning, I'm not doubting, but how do you know it's not a part of your own mind or not? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very important question. Yeah. So let me go back further. When I was at the university, I joined forces with a researcher at Duke University. He was a medical researcher. And because I was trained in hypnotherapy, I could go into a trance state. And so he said, why don't we do some experiments? So once a week for several months, I would go over to his place and I would lay down and I would channel this information. And we called him the big dude. Mm-hmm. And all this information came through, and it was, when you look at the plethora of channeled material, there's a type of cliche in which they speak. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting information, but nothing that was tangible, viable, that could be proven. Mm-hmm. So with the Hathors, when they came along, they appeared to me clairvoyantly, and I hear them clairaudiently. It's not physical sight.
You hear them the way you're not hearing your own internal. How do you separate that from your own internal dialogue, your own?
Right. It's a very important point, and they made this point early on. It's a vibrational field. It's a feeling tone, and I have to listen to them through my heart chakra, and they are masters of what we would call love energy. And so it has a signature. When I'm in their presence, my heart goes, ah. And it's not a mental thing. I hear them, but there's a feeling tonality, and that's the signature that I'm actually talking to them and not to some subpersonality running around in the gerbil cage of my mind.
Right. And so they appear to you that way, but you saw them visually as well.
Clairvoyant, yes. But clairvoyant, a psychic impression. Two of them appeared. One spoke and one was observing.
And you've been trained enough to trust those impressions, which makes people like you and channels, really good channels, different than other people who, well, first of all, who don't have a strong ego structure to hold the difference between their frequency and somebody else's, so
yes.
Isn't there a place where that heart opening wants to merge as Tom, with that feel? I mean, you're not just the limited personality, of course. You are that heart awakened being as well. And
yes.
And are you the Hathors, or even maybe, let's say, we'll call it your higher self, pushing you to merge?
Yes. There is no pushing to merge.
I don't mean pushing, but isn't that your future in a sense?
You could look at it that way, yes.
isn't that who you want to be? I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking. When you talk about the Hathors opening the heart, that's the state I want to be in all the time.
Right.
I mean, so where does that show up on your personality scale of desires? You know?
I would say that love is the reference point
Mm-hmm.
most of the time for me. And life brings situations where I have to deal with duality, and how I deal with the duality becomes a dance.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, in my relationship to the Hathors, there's a clear delineation between them and me. But that heart response is me, clearly. And the future being that I'm hopefully growing into accommodates the Hathors, but is not the Hathors.
I see.
That being that is me is a different evolutionary track than the Hathors. They're like companions that offer very insightful information, and sometimes extraordinary information.
I think I'm just thinking we're all wanting to go there as a planetary civilization. I mean, that's...
Well, I would hope so, but I don't think everybody wants to go there.
Oh.
It's a planetary civilization. I think some people want to stay in hatred and blame and anger and hostility, and that's the reality that they want to perpetuate. And perhaps there's a seed somewhere of that potential for love. So I agree with you. I would hope that the whole planet would want to move in that space, but when I really feel the reality of how I perceive it, that's how I have to say it, how I perceive the planetary reality, not everybody is on the choo-choo train that's leading to the big open heart. Some want conflict, and they feed off of conflict.
Yeah, I think they want it because they have some stuff to work through, I guess.
Definitely.
There's some level, which is okay. I guess we've all been there, done that. Well, also what's interesting about your work is the sound frequencies. Is that related to the Hathors, or is that related to other energetic beings?
It's related to the Hathors and a whole host of other energetic beings. I actually started working with sound way before the Hathors started working with me.
And the sound, well, I could see that you're out of the way, and it's pure vibration. So you'll be doing some of that in New York as well, right?
Mostly sound. There'll be very little talking. Mostly it's an immersion into the sound of these different electromagnetic fields of intelligence called angels in different traditions. But it's mostly an experience, a journey through sound.
And then one more thing about the Hathors. Are they related to the Egyptians' gods, the Hathors?
They tell me that they were instrumental in the Hathor, fertility goddess of ancient Egypt. So they would appear to the priestesses and the priests in the Hathor temples. Hathor is the Egyptian goddess of fertility, ecstasy, birthing, new life. And we know from archaeologists that harps and flutes and drums, music was used in the Hathor temples. They've excavated these. And the Hathors, these beings, say that they had a relationship with the priests and priestesses on the inner planes, and they would take them into their vibration and reveal information to them. So they said that their work was through the Hathor goddess temples, and a lot of that, especially at Dendara, had to do with resurrection of life force energies.
So the sound frequencies were about the resurrection, and birth was a resurrection then of the soul. What is a future look like for the merging of these universes that are stacked up? I mean, you're getting visited, and I would say an explorer of consciousness. You've been able to use the facility of your brain to access other realities that are potential for all of us to...
Yes. Right.
And what do they feel and you feel is the future of this new level of society that is interactive with the multiverse? Do you know what I'm asking? Okay.
That's a great way to say it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking.
No.
We do live in a multiverse.
Yeah.
And so there's great curiosity among the different beings that I encounter about what's happening here in our solar system, in this galaxy, on this little speck at the far outside arm of this Milky Way. Mm-hmm. And nothing quite like this has ever happened before, so there's...
Nothing quite like what?
Like what we're going through.
Okay.
The evolutionary thrust, the speed and the rapidity, being a little redundant here, that we're going through the biological stress, the psychic stress, emotional stress, all of these things are escalating. And so nobody really knows what's the outcome. There are probabilities, possibilities, but none of them have said this is what's going to happen to me.
Because it's
They're
up to
saying
us.
we're in a tremendous, chaotic / creative time. And the Chinese, of course, had a wonderful ideogram for transformation, which means danger and opportunity, because there's tremendous danger in the situation we're in, but there's also tremendous opportunity. And the opportunity comes from the choices that you and I and everyone else on this planet will make in our lives.
Is this a small window? I mean, how long is this going to go on for, this opportunity, do you think?
I think it's eternal.
Oh, but
This changes. I think that things will even off, but I don't know that we'll be here on the planet when that happens.
Or we'll shift to something else, because, so many people are awakening, and I'll introduce you to some of those people. The only other thing that I thought was really fascinating that was brought up in the movie, The Song of the New Earth, is how you met Judy, your wife. I mean, that first experience where you passed her on a bus when you were...
Yes.
That's
9 years old, something like that.
9 years old. You're on a bus, she's in a car, you look at each other for a moment, and that stays with you, and then you meet, 30, 40 years later?
40 years later.
That's miraculous, isn't it?
It is. It's the timeline is very odd on that one. I remember that moment vividly.
But what does that say to you, that sort of miracle? Because I believe, and I've often had visions of something like that. Nothing has happened, but what does that say to you about your destiny and timelines? And I mean, there's something in that, but I don't know what.
I think we were destined to be together, but we both say we wish it had happened sooner. So if I could get hold of the person who arranged the timeline, I'd like to have a talk with them, and it'd been nice to have met earlier. But is it... we didn't meet, and that's a kind of a miracle. When you look at the whole situation, it's rather remarkable.
Yeah, it's incredible. And do you think, though, something from the future, do you think you both, because of course there's no time, and then some part of the future came back and arranged that sort of alignment? Or
yeah, I think that's a nice way to look at it.
I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, because it's so strange and interesting. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you in New York, and thank you for this time. Anything you want to add just about Company of Angels? It's going to be at Symphony Space, which is at Broadway and 95th. It's a beautiful space. I've been there a bunch of times. Anything people should do to prepare for that event? Yep. Just show up, right?
And if somebody can't be there physically, then go to the website and go to the last Hathor message on the nature of angels, and they will give instructions, including the sound meditation that's free on the website, where they can participate anywhere in the world with the meditation that will take place. But only those who are physically there for the whole event can participate in the meditation physically there in Symphony Space. But anyone else can tune in at 5:30, between 5:30 and 6. And the instructions are on the website.
That's September 5th, 2015. For people watching, if they tune in 5:30 p.m. New York time, they'll be able to get the energy that's coming through planetarily. So, wow, your work's increasing. You're now broadcasting to a planet, and in a sense.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Tom, for this few minutes here. And
thank you, Alan.
And I look forward to meeting you.
I look forward to it.
Great. Have a great time in Europe. What's the reception of your work in Europe?
Oh, they love it.
Yeah.
It's very, very positively received. All over the world, people are waking up and doing the work to elevate themselves and their communities. It's really very inspiring to see.
Yeah, that shows us that we're taking it seriously, the transformation that's happening here. All right. Thanks. This is Alan Steinfeld with Tom Kenyon talking about the Hathors, and the day is called In the Company of Angels, September 5th in New York City at Symphony Space, and you go to Tom's website, tomkenyon.com, for more information. Thanks for watching.